Hello, friends and family, and welcome back to episode 8 of 10 about Alta Rivers Gilbert Thornton and her family. Last episode, I shared some newspaper clippings of the comings and goings of Alta Rivers and her sisters Flora and Bertha. We even saw a few mentions of Father Samuel, Brother Robert, and a visit from Martha. But there was one story that I decided to save all for its own. It's printed in at least 3 different newspapers that is 100% our Alta Rivers Gilbert, and even provides a photo of her around the age of 20. This episode is titled Alta Rivers Recreant Lover. We will read these 3 newspaper articles, one from Indianapolis, another from Cincinnati, and one from Jasper, Indiana, a small community in the southwest corner of the state that, to my knowledge, has no connection to Alta Rivers or her family, suggesting that this story went across the wires and probably is in more newspapers than I was able to find. Starting with the one from the Herald of Jasper, Indiana, dated June 8, 1906, the headline says, "A broken promise causes Covington girl to appeal to Indiana police." Indianapolis, Indiana must be where the news wire was sent out of, and it looks like the news release date was June 6. A handsome, well-dressed young woman giving her name as Alta Gilbert of Covington, Kentucky, called at the police station Tuesday night and asked for the arrest of William B. Phillips of 1916 West 25th Street, claiming that he broke his promise to marry her and returned all her letters and presents. She was informed that a civil suit would be necessary. She is getting ready to take that step. Phillips did not care to talk about the case. So this is the first of the 3 articles that I found. And right away, I was like, this can't be our Alta Rivers Gilbert, can it? But of course, I kept digging. And then I found this second article. This article is from Indianapolis, the same date, and this time the headline says, "Girl traces lover, hopes to prevent wedding. She tells police that she was cast aside, ask that their former sweetheart be arrested." This article says, just to show that, quote, "no man can get ahead of her," as she expressed it, Miss Albert Gilbert, a pretty and stylishly dressed young woman, came to Indianapolis yesterday afternoon from her home in Covington, Kentucky, and asked the police to arrest Will Phillips, 1916 West 25th Street, on the charge of breach of promise. After Desk Sergeant John Corrigan had heard her story and informed her that the police were powerless to act in such cases, the fair daughter of the bluegrass country stamped her little foot impatiently on the floor of the police station and announced that she would take the law into her own hands. She went directly to the home of the man she said has jilted her, and not being able to find him, informed his sisters that she was going to bring suit for breach of promise immediately. She then left for Greenwood, where she says she knows a lawyer who will aid her. Greenwood, by the way, is in Johnson County, which we covered in the previous episode. The article continues with some direct quotes from Alta Rivers. She says, quote, "Will and I have been engaged for a year and a half," said Miss Gilbert to Sergeant Corrigan. "Last week he wrote that our engagement was at an end and that he could not marry me because he loved another better. He also returned all the presents which I had sent to him since our engagement began." She paused a moment for reflection and then broke out excitedly, "I want him arrested right away for breach of promise. If you don't get him tonight, I just know he will marry that other woman tomorrow." Sergeant Corrigan was touched by the young woman's appeals and sought to quiet her by asking what she did when she received the letter which blasted her hopes and happiness. She said, "I sent him a special delivery saying that if I did not hear from him by Tuesday afternoon, I would come to Indianapolis." When seen last night at his home, Phillips admitted that he had been engaged to the girl, but declined to make a statement for publication. And here's the last article. This one from the Cincinnati Post, dated June 6th. I will show you the headline on the next slide, but this is the more detailed of the three. And before I start reading it, let me just point out that this story gets more space than the plot to kill the king in Italy, which I think is a little bit hilarious. But, it is local news, so maybe it should have gotten the bigger space. This one starts, Miss Alta Gilbert, 22 and pretty, living with her sister, Miss Davis, 28 West 3rd Street, Covington, on May 21st, announced her engagement to William B. Phillips of Indianapolis. A few days ago, she received from Phillips a package containing all her letters and presents and a note saying that the engagement was off. There was no explanation. Miss Gilbert immediately left for Indianapolis. Then it explains how they met. Miss Davis says that her younger sister met Phillips about a year ago while visiting relatives in Indianapolis. The acquaintance soon ripened into a love affair, she says, and Phillips appeared to be most devoted. He made many visits to Covington and has accepted the hospitality of the Davis home for a week at a time on more than one occasion, although he has relatives living in Cincinnati. The young people corresponded regularly. Miss Davis says that several valuable presents were exchanged. Then it says, when Miss Gilbert received her letters, presents, and the short note breaking off the engagement, she was astonished beyond all description. Then her astonishment gave way to heartbroken grief, which in turn was followed by a determination to bring the former lover to a realization of the sinful folly of trifling with a young girl's affections. Lastly, it concludes by saying, she at once left for Indianapolis and took up residence with her relatives. She sought out Phillips. He gave her no satisfaction. She appealed to the police, asking for a warrant for his arrest. She was told that she must institute a civil suit, and this she said she would do immediately. So I imagine that not everyone feels the same way that I do about these articles, but I have to confess that they made me love Alta Rivers even more. She had personality and passion and conviction, and the whole situation is very relatable, a story that many girls in their 20s know all too well. And yes, that is a Taylor Swift reference. I love that we get these direct quotes from her and the visual of her tapping her foot in the station, the description of her as pretty and stylish. So I think that this was just a really great find. The thing I love the most about this article is that we get a photo of her. And here she is. This is my great grandmother, Alta Rivers Gilbert, my mother's maternal grandmother, waiting to be found by her grandchildren 120 years later. I assume that she is somewhere between 18 and 21 years old in this photo. I do want to take a few extra steps to prove that this is indeed our Alta Rivers, because when I showed this article to a few people last year, they immediately said this cannot be her, which I completely understand because that was my reaction at first. Also, remember that the article said she lived on 28 West 3rd Street. Well, I found this 1906 directory for Covington, Kentucky that lists Alta Gilbert as living at 28 West 3rd Street. Also living at 28 West 3rd Street is Lewis Davis, a painter. And if you go back to episode 3, I shared that Martha and Lewis Davis were living with Robert Gilbert, and Lewis Davis was listed as a painter. Also in episode 3, I shared Martha's obituary that names Flora and Alta Thornton as her sisters. Here's an updated timeline for Alta Rivers. We find her in 1902, presumably traveling with another couple. She was most likely placed out with a family to help with domestic duties, which would have been common for that time. We then see her in Johnson County in 1904. Later that year, she goes to Indianapolis, presumably alone, to work in the city. This 1905 article that is on your screen is one that I shared in episode 7 and wanted to bring attention back to it because she is visiting her family in Johnson County from Indianapolis. But if you look at the second paragraph, it says that Mr. Phillips and wife of Indianapolis took dinner Monday of this week with E.C. Jacobs. So I'm guessing that Alta's William Phillips was the son of this couple, and E.C. Jacobs, of course, is a name that we heard associated with Alta's sister Bertha. There's a little room for creativity there. Did Alta return to visit her family knowing that William Phillips was also coming, or did they meet there and they knew they both lived in Indianapolis and that's where that got started? Then, of course, we've got these 1906 articles about her breakup. And a year and a half to 2 years later, we see her back in Franklin County for the summer. 1909, Alta Rivers' grandmother Eliza passes away. And then we see Alta in the 1910 census, which we covered in episode 2. The big question in all of this is how and when did Alta Rivers Gilbert meet Curtis Dow Thornton? Family members will know that Alta and Curtis marry in 1910. That will be the topic of our next episode. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next time.